Welcome to Contact's 12th webinar in our Produce Safety webinar series. This second season will tackle a new fresh produce safety topic every month through a dynamic webinar series that will continue to bring together industry, academia, and regulatory minds to solve some of the produce industry's biggest and most timely challenges. This series is part of a larger industry outreach and risk mitigation project called Contact, or Scientific Challenges and Cost-Effective Management of Risks Associated with Implementation of Produce Safety Regulations. This project is supported by the Specialty Crops Research Initiative from the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture. All opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this presentation are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the view of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. This webinar series, coupled with other research and extension efforts, is part of a collaborative effort across 10 different universities and government institutions to enhance produce safety knowledge and compliance across the industry. We are so grateful to our collaborators for their efforts and support of this webinar series. You can see their logos on the screen. The webinar series will continue next month with a panel of experts discussing traceability in the fresh produce industry. We are in for a special treat as Dr. Jennifer McIntyre will lead this presentation with invited guests from Taylor Farms and Walmart on Thursday, February 23rd. We are so excited and we hope you will join us for To the Buyer and Beyond, what the new traceability rule means for the produce industry. This year's webinar series will address brand new topics chosen by you. We've got an exciting new list of webinars scheduled for this year. If you think a topic is missing from the list, please let us know in the comments, webinar surveys, email us, or engage with us on social media or our YouTube channel. While the webinar series lets us meet with you once a month, that's just not enough for us. We'd love to hashtag make contact with you about today's webinar or other produce safety news and research on our Twitter and Instagram pages. Follow us on these platforms at ps_sci. Also be sure to check out the Contact website for more produce safety resources, including our key takeaways documents, which give a high-level overview of the webinars and provide key resources that were outlined. Additionally, you can visit our Produce Safety Science YouTube page. You can subscribe for alerts when content is posted. A quick reminder for today, if you would like to submit a question for our speakers during or before the Q&A, please submit your questions through the Q&A box, not the chat box. Now, let's welcome our guest moderator who will introduce our speakers and be our guide for today. Dr. Emily Griep is the VP of Regulatory Compliance and Global Food Safety Standards at the International Fresh Produce Association. In its role, she provides long-term strategic planning for the association's scientific and policy objectives. She also offers food safety training and education support for the association's international membership, including importers and exporters. Outside of IFPA, Emily serves on the technical committee for the Center for Produce Safety. She is a member of the U.S. Delegation for Codex Committee on Food and Hygiene, and she also co-chairs the Regulatory Affairs Working Group for the Food and Beverages Issues Alliance. Emily, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Thank you so much, Laura, and I'm very glad to be here with yet another all-star group of experts that you've invited for the webinar series. Today's webinar is titled The Future is Now, and each of our speakers will be providing their perspective on how data sharing enhances food safety. As Laura said, I have the pleasure of introducing each of our speakers today, starting with Sonia Salas. Sonia is currently Western Growers Assistant Vice President of Science, and she's been with the association since 2007. In this role, Sonia is responsible for leading and overseeing the development and implementation of diverse food safety efforts, including member resources development, policy development, outreach, education, and training programs for the fresh produce industry. Before joining Western Growers, she worked in different food facilities, managing food safety and quality assurance systems and implementing federal, state, and local requirements. Next is Cronan McNarmara. Cronan founded Creme Global in 2005. The company has built data science platforms that can aggregate, anonymize, and visualize data, as well as run advanced risk models. The Creme Global team has authored over 60 peer-reviewed publications on food safety, and in 2022, Cronan was appointed adjunct professor in the UCD School of Agriculture and Food Science in Dublin, Ireland. Dr. Deanne Davis joined Western Growers in July 2020 as the Senior Vice President of Science. Deanne has more than 30 years of experience in the development and execution of technical global programs, including toxicology, food safety, quality assurance, and regulatory compliance. After over 20 years in consumer product safety, she transitioned to package and fresh produce safety nearly a decade ago. Prior to Western Growers, she served as the Vice President of Food Safety and Quality for both Church Brothers Farms and Earthbound Farms, and earlier as Chief Food Safety Officer for Kraft Foods Group. Last but certainly not least, Tony Banegas has worked in the food industry for nearly 30 years and joined Bonduelle Fresh Americas in 2009, when the company was known as Ready Packed Foods. He has been responsible for Bonduelle Fresh Americas quality assurance and food safety activities in its 4 respective processing plants, and he currently holds the position of Vice President, Food Safety and Industry Relations. In this role, he oversees food safety from the growing fields and fostering relationships with key customers, industry associations, regulatory representatives, and many others, and he serves on respective technical councils striving towards continuous improvement in food safety. Key areas of focus have been in environmental monitoring, field sampling, field harvest crew training and equipment requirements, cooler standards, and validation and verification standards for whole produce and fresh cut processing. So to kick things off, I would like to welcome Sonia. Sonia, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Emily, for that introduction. And also thank you, Contact Serious team, for the opportunity to be here today. I'm excited. I was asked to introduce the topic of food safety data sharing, but I can't do that without addressing data science. So I am going to share a few slides with you, and I will discuss data sharing, data science, and product safety briefly. I want to start with a question. Is data sharing the future of food safety? If someone asks you that question, would you say yes or not? If today's topic got your attention, I assume your answer is yes. And so the potential benefits of data sharing and data science have been discussed for years. So this is not new, not a new topic. However, for years, the use of those areas and tools has been limited because of concerns regarding data standardization, access, and privacy. So today, the good news and what you're going to be hearing today is related to exit solutions. They can address those concerns and how data science is here and can transform food safety. So this slide you see here has a definition from Wikipedia on data science in simple words. It is referring to the use of different data tools and methods to turn data into insight. And the infographic on the right is just to illustrate the process of getting data into action. Some of you might say, my company is already using data in this decision-making process. And I'll say, yes, many to some extent might be doing that. However, learning is still happening in silos. So from where I see, the perspective is that the produce industry can really benefit from data sharing. If we think about brands for the produce industry, it's not as relevant that it is to other industries. As if there is an outbreak issue with tomatoes per se, the entire tomato industry gets impacted. So really, we need to work collectively to find industry-level solutions and foster innovation. I'm going to end this portion here by saying and sharing that working with the Produce Association for over 15 years has given me the opportunity to see many missed opportunities to learn collectively, and also a few situations where industry has benefited from data sharing. So my point is that collectively we can learn, and learning has to be amplified with data sharing to get there and embracing data science. With the FDA's new era of smarter food safety, we know there is a call for a new approach and mindset. And one of the core elements of this plan is really the use of innovative tools and approaches for prevention and response. So that includes data analytics. And the point here is that both industry and government, we both should be unleashing the power of data by embracing data science and data sharing to enhance food safety. Something you have seen before, and you might have heard about the race between prevention and detection because you heard it from Frank Llanas, the FDA's Deputy Commissioner for Food Policy and Response. He has said that the ability to detect foodborne illnesses is greater than the ability to prevent them. If we think about that, what that means is that foodborne illnesses prevention is losing against detection. And so we need to accelerate prevention. And to change the outcome of that race, food safety data sharing and data science are crucial. I am quoting Frank Llanas again one more time, and because I believe in this. Better food safety begins and ends with better data. And the title of this webinar emphasizes that. The title is related to the future is now, but how data sharing enhances food safety. And so the answer is here. The rate of data generation, it's increasing tremendously. However, there is a gap between having data and having usable information. This is not news for many of you. We know the data with context and meaning is information. And so to get there, the point we want to make here today is the food safety data sharing and the use of data science have to work together. And for the produce industry, that's what can make a difference. I have a couple of additional visuals. Briefly, I want to make the point that all of this comes down to breaking down silos and giving data meaning. So if we think about it, there is a process, there are steps that need to happen. So if we think about diverse observations and records, what you see here, to make sense of all of this, we need to move to a structured collection process, recording, analyzing, and visualizing insights so that we can contribute to decision-making related to food safety issues. You might have seen different knowledge pyramids before and have heard the data is not information, knowledge, or insight. It is going through a process. And what here I want to emphasize is that the value of data increases with the structure and data analytics, which is not a surprise. And many of the things I'm saying are no surprise for all of you. But my point is data sharing can be a game changer. And so I'm just going to go through a few examples of how data sharing, it's made a difference before you can get into more of the meat of the webinar. So this first example is straightforward. It illustrates how researchers benefit from data sharing and analytics. This study was recently published in the American Society for Microbiology journal. And the authors study, they were investigating if non-crop vegetation removal is associated with improved food safety and if there was an effect on water quality. So the findings suggested that non-crop vegetation removal is not associated with improved food safety outcomes, but it is associated with impaired water quality. This emphasizes a clear co-management issue and provides a framework for evaluating environmental and food safety trade-offs. However, I am not here to discuss the study findings, but instead what I want to do is point out what they did here. The researchers, they use a large database extracted from multiple published research studies and publicly available data sources. And then using a structural equation model, they investigated those effects. And now, in other words, what happened here is really that they were leveraging existing data tools and data models. In my next example, you might find this closer to us, right? This is something we can relate to. It illustrates government's use of data, specifically whole genome sequencing data sharing in their detection and investigation efforts. Again, this is not about a specific issue on detection and whole genome sequencing, but again, to make the point that public databases are being used to advance foodborne illnesses detection efforts. And so that is in part what is being accelerated in the detection race that I discussed before. In the next example, it is interesting to share this one because of the use of artificial intelligence. And again, this is a government example. In plain words, what they're doing is using a simulation of human intelligence machines. And so what they're looking at is reviewing existing data to find trends and patterns that can help them predict issues. And with that, plan and prioritize inspections of seafood shipments. As 94% of the seafood in the United States that is consumed in the United States comes from overseas. So you can imagine how much interest and importance this data analytics and sharing project can have for the agency in this situation. And so I share what researchers are doing, what government is doing, but what is the industry doing? I do have one last example, and this is a fresh produce industry platform. It's Greenlink, which allows data sharing among industry members to help with collection and analysis of data, in addition to learning from public data sources while protecting their privacy. I won't go into details about what this platform does. You are going to get more information from the next speakers, but the point that I want to make with all these examples is really that sharing data has magnified the impact of learning. And in other words, the value of the data science is maximized when data is no longer in silos because it's shared. All of this sounds a lot of theory here, but you're going to see practical examples. And then to conclude here, in the last slide here that I have, I want to say the data is not actionable and in silos has limited use. And so as you hear the presentation, think about the difference we can do collectively as a produce industry. I leave you with this. Data sharing and data science is the future, and the future is now. If we don't embrace it now, when are we going to embrace it? With that, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Sonia. And so we'll bring up Cronan to now talk about how he and Creme Global are using data and communicating data and talking about how it all works.
Thanks, Emily. Good afternoon, everybody. And thanks for Laura and the Contact Series organizers for the invitation to speak today. I really enjoyed Sonia's definition of data science. That's the stuff that gets us excited here in Creme Global, that interdisciplinary science using data and computing to solve problems. I'm going to take you through a little bit of the technical details about how we do this. How does data sharing really work? And practical nuts and bolts. I'll go through it quite quickly, and a few case studies, and finally talk a little bit more about the Western Growers Greenlink platform that Sonia mentioned. So about us, Creme Global, we are an interdisciplinary team. My background is in maths and computing, but I've worked in food safety for over 20 years. And Creme Global as a team has a very interdisciplinary capability, right from food scientists, data scientists, toxicologists, biologists, right through to software engineers and data engineers. And it takes that kind of broad capability to maximize the use, collection, anonymize, and use of data to make better decisions. So our goal is to help organizations and collaborate with organizations to help them make better decisions around food safety, health, nutrition, using predictive modeling and science. And as Emily kindly said in introduction, we do value science and have written a number of scientific publications over the years. I'm quite active in that area. So my first topic will be how to manage data collection, aggregation, and sharing. And this is from a technical perspective, but also how to get people involved and how to get them to trust the approach and the systems and motivations around this. So if you think about data science, all the exciting stuff, you can think about this pyramid and hierarchy of needs, and Sonia had a similar one. And I think about it like this. We're trying to get to the top of the pyramid where you do the exciting stuff with predictive analytics. But in order to do that, you have to start at the bottom of the pyramid and do the hard work of gathering data, structuring that data, analyzing, visualizing the data, and then finally getting to predictive analytics. So over the years, we've developed a number of technologies to help with this. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Data Foundry in particular today, because this whole series is about, this whole webinar is about data sharing. And this Foundry platform has enabled secure, anonymous data sharing in order for us then to build that structured data set that can be used for insight and finally for foresight and prediction. So Data Foundry is a kind of a platform technology that we've been developing for many years, and I'll show you some case studies of how we've used this in industry, which facilitates that collection, anonymization, importantly, structuring and modeling of diverse data from around the world in order to make better decisions. So here's a schematic of kind of the workflow, or how the anonymization works and how these predictive projects tend to come together. So at the bottom left, you'll see there are many organizations who decide that it's going to be valuable to share data. So they can work with us. We first of all will define data structures, the kind of data sets that would be valuable to share. And we agree upon that. And then organizations can submit their data through a secure data storage area. This can be done simply through using Excel or uploading files to the web, or for more automation can be done with APIs or automatic application programming interfaces in order to gather this data. Once the data comes in, we have technology then to anonymize that data and put it into a secure database. Often that data then gets supplemented with publicly available data, for example, on weather or food consumption patterns or other environmental information, which can be available to pull from the web via these publicly available data sets. And combining all of that data, we would generally move forward with predictive modeling and visualization in a dashboard. And those dashboards are then anonymized and made available to the organizations so they can understand their own data, but they can, more importantly, get the power and the value from the collaborated data, because the more data that's available, the more insight that can be generated through visualization and predictive modeling. These can be developed even further with collaborating then between, say, industry and academia, and have different organizations collaborating and government even, to bring forward the data sets that they require into the predictive model. So the concept of data sharing can be facilitated across many organizations and different types of organizations in order to add even more richness to the data and more capability to the predictive models. There's a bit of detail in this slide, but the main thing that can be drawn from it on the left-hand side here, you can see that there's different ways of uploading or importing data into the portal. So it could be anything from PDF files, which aren't particularly desirable because it's hard to pull structured data from PDFs, but then through to more structured data like CSV files, Excel files, and then using APIs or even accessing the internet to pull data into the data portal. And then that goes through many steps. A data lake tends to be the terminology used for the place where all of the data is initially stored, and then it's processed and structured, maybe anonymized and reformatted into a warehouse. And then the data can, once it's more organized in a warehouse, as you'd imagine from thinking about the concept of a warehouse, things are organized. So the data becomes more organized, can be pulled into predictive modeling. Certain views of that data can be made available then through the visualization in a dashboard or some type of visualization opportunity. So that's just a kind of schematic of how data can move from the user's own personal computer or systems within any organization and move through a process where it becomes much more structured and can be used for predictive modeling or even just basic visualization, which can be very valuable. So I have a few examples of how we've done this over the years. So we've been doing this for many years in Creme Global. And the first one is in the crop protection industry. The CARES Cumulative and Aggregate Risk Exposure Scenario Group is interested in gathering data, and RAJV is a task force within this consortium as well. If you look on the right-hand side here, this group has got together and they've gathered a lot of publicly available data on food consumption in the NHANES National Health and Nutrition Survey, food commodity intake data, FICID, PDP is all about pesticides, and other data sets. And we've worked with them to structure all of this data and put it into a secure system. And then they can actually combine their own information from each company with this publicly available data in order to look at dietary exposure to chemicals that are within the food supply, and they can look at water and residential exposures as well. And the EPA and are a stakeholder within this project, and they've been very involved in the kind of curation of data and the collaboration on the science that goes into these models in order for the industry then to be able to communicate with the EPA from a common standard of data and modeling. The Food Industry Intelligence Network, also called FIN, has implemented a very interesting data sharing model. They're interested in food fraud in the supply chain, which is a very sensitive topic. And many companies may discover incidents of fraud in their supply chain, but it's very hard to share that information amongst the industry. So they came up with a very clever anonymization system where more than 40, in the order of 50 now, actually, companies and retailers in this network in the UK, and more widely actually across Europe and the USA now, we've anonymized everything, even the usernames, so that when a company submits a report or a data set around some kind of finding in the supply chain, even we don't know who submitted that data. And we aggregate and group all of that information and make that available to the whole industry through analytical dashboards. They can all learn from the information that each company has. And you can see immediately how one company alone would not have a full picture of what's going on in the supply chain, but together, when they collaborate and share data, they can have a much more informed view of what's going on. This project, the Research Institute for Fragrance Materials, has been running for many years, and this was a very big and very collaborative project from the fragrance industry and the finished product manufacturers, and run by RIFM in New Jersey. So what they've done there is organize a system where they want to understand the uses of fragrance compounds and how much is being used and how much people are getting exposed to on a daily basis. Fragrance compounds are very sensitive because these will be the fine fragrances that get bought and sold by fragrance manufacturers. They get sold onto a company that makes a finished product like a shampoo, body lotion, or deodorant spray. They're very proprietary about what the formulations are in those ingredients and in the finished products. But they all want to understand that the consumer is not going to get exposed to too much of any particular ingredient or fragrance. So they came together to share all of this information. And Creme Global, again, has developed a portal where they can securely upload information on the use of fragrance compounds. And we've also built a model on the habits and practices of personal care and cosmetic products by the US and European populations. And we combine all of that data on a monthly basis as they survey more and more fragrance compounds. And they have actually gone back and resurveyed, and they've now over 3,000 fragrance compounds in the database. And this means that industry has far more insight about the habits and practices of their consumers and the potential exposures to ingredients in the products. And they collaborate again with industry. For example, the FDA also has access to this model. Industry can license and have access to the model. So they all speak the same language in terms of data and science in order to protect consumers and ensure the safety of those chemicals. So finally, then, my final example of the future is now is this project, which is well up and running now, certainly is in the present, not the future. And this is the Greenlink project. And again, this follows a similar data portal, data collection process as many of our projects now at this stage. So we have many growers now participating in the platform. And on a regular basis, they're uploading information on their food safety and their options. These could be things like inspections, pre-season and pre-harvest inspections of their ranches and their lots. They're uploading information on the product testing, as in the leafy greens and the lettuces and the other vegetables they're growing. They're uploading information on their testing of those, which is routine and pre-harvest testing. They're uploading information on their water testing. And one operation alone can obviously try to use that data to understand what's going on in their operation. But when all of these growers are now sharing data, they can see the bigger picture and they can benchmark their operations versus other operations. They can see trends that are happening not just within their organization and their region, but more broadly across the whole industry. So they're uploading this data, and we've had a number of months now where we've been gathering data. They've been using APIs to automate this process, so it makes it much easier on the team. This data comes into a secure database again, combined with much public data from weather, wind, rain, wind direction, fire even in the region, and all of that. So a lot of public data is coming into the system alongside this food safety operational data. And that's being used, first of all, simply to visualize it. Each company can see their own private data in their own dashboard, but then there's an aggregated data which is totally anonymized, which all all participants in the program can also see. So they're starting to see the bigger picture of trends across their whole industry in the region. We're now training predictive models using machine learning on that data to try and see what trends and interesting phenomena the computer can pick up that isn't even visible to us as human inspections of the data. All participants get access to this dashboard and this predictive capability. Just a quick look on how it works. So they have this portal where they can use on the web, very simple. We agree at the template of the data structures they're going to upload, and off they go. And they can have data submissions and approvals, different people doing that so they can collaborate with their lab company, for example, to submit the data. But a lot of them now are moving towards more automated versions using APIs, so they don't even have to log in on the web and do this. On my last slide is the quick look at then the type of information they can see. So we can now visualize the data geographically. We can look at it over time. We can look at the total amount of data they've submitted. We can look at the percentage out of threshold results they can look at that for their own organization. This is all just dummy data. This doesn't represent any grower or any particular real data that we've gathered. So we have this demonstration data, but they have information on inspections, inspection timelines, how weather and inspections have overlapped. Are they seeing trends between weather events and something they observe in their ranches? Are they seeing correlations between weather and any of their testing results in the water or in the product itself? And even it helps them with understanding the cost of all of the food safety activities. This is just a start, but it's starting to deliver a really good value. That's my last slide, and I'd just like to leave you with a quote where William Gibson has said, "The future is here. It's just not evenly distributed." But we can see that the growers are already in the future, and many other groups are trying to catch up. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cronan. I think you and Sonia both did a great job of really teeing up the conversation and teasing this Greenlink platform. And so now I'm inviting Deanne Davis to come up and talk a little bit more about Greenlink.
Right. Thank you, Emily. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, it's my job to give you a deeper dive into Greenlink. So let's get started. So if you're not familiar with Western growers, I just wanted to give you just a few bits of information. So we are a trade association and advocacy organization that's been supporting growers in the Western states for almost 100 years now. We have a pretty diverse membership, both in size as well as the location and the commodities that are being driven. A lot of our operations are optional, both in the Western states across the US and internationally. This project is being sponsored by the nonprofit 501c portion. That is really important because we have a funding source, at least to get this started and to keep it maintained. I'd love to have obviously more money and to be able to do bigger and better, but it's how we've gotten this started, because I think when you think about data sharing and data trust, one of the biggest concerns you have is stepping out there is, how are you going to keep it going? How do you get started and how do you keep it going? And as Cronan provided to you, I'll just give you a little bit more facts behind Greenlink. It is a customized data sharing platform that is being built and managed by Creme, but it really was designed, led, and actually envisioned by our members. And I'll go into that a little bit more. It is multifaceted. We are not done by any stretch of the imagination. We hope it continues to be adaptable and responsive to the types of data that we're provided with, how it needs to be collected, the constant challenges of standardizing the data, and the best ways to share, report, and analyze the data. And then finally, I also want to make sure that we make the point that we do consider Greenlink as a private data trust. And as Cronan alluded to, that doesn't mean in the future we don't see the capabilities of our members' data, or those who are participating in Greenlink, their data being able to interact with other types of organizations' data, such as academic institutions or the CDC or whoever might have a good data set for us to query and do co-analysis. But for the purposes of what we're trying to do, we're really trying to make sure that our membership feels comfortable and confident that the data that they're providing is solely theirs. It belongs to them. They participate how they wish to, and that the information that they glean from it is both informative to their individual operation, but also to kind of risk management across the industry. These are just basic statistics on Greenlink at the current moment. We have over 100 growers within the platform that have been participating. It covers about 3 states, over 1 million data points. And since the data platform was constructed on historical data, the data actually goes back about 6 years for some operations. Cronan already went over this with you, so I won't go into it in any more detail, except the point I want to make here, which Cronan didn't make, is that Western Growers doesn't have access to any of this data. It does go directly from the grower into the platform that Creme Global provides. The only access that we have is through the aggregate dashboard, and we don't see individual company operational data, nor do we know what data is submitted by who and when. This is just a snapshot of the timeline. I guess I always feel very humbled by how far we've gotten, but we really have just gotten started too. I guess that's the main point here. And as I mentioned, this has been a member-led initiative, and it started back in 2017 when members were hoping that the power of kind of collating some of their food safety testing data might be persuasive in a number of directions, both in terms of conversations with regulatory authorities, but also hopefully with other stakeholders. And so Western Growers started off with building an in-house tool with some data from some volunteers. But by the spring of 2021, the board of directors really decided that they needed to invest in something bigger and stronger and more long-lasting, and to really embrace the idea of building a data trust. And so that's how we got started. And we went and looked out to see what type of partnerships that we could form. We hired Creme Global to be that partner. We formed a volunteer committee, which did the original designs for the platform. We selected some academic advisors, and we had first started with developing common definitions and building data templates. And we are still working on common definitions and data templates, but it's all to be said, that's where we started. And you can see it was just barely 2 years ago. Then a few months later, about 6 months after hiring Creme, we were able to actually start to recruit farms to join the data platform. It was functioning and it did have the ability to collect data. We did focus, though, for the last year or more or so on really the ease of that data transfer, making sure that it was seamless for a farm to participate, for a grower to participate, and that their data could be transferred easily and consistently. Because again, this is all about how an operation wants to participate in data sharing. And so we need to have as much flexibility and confidence as possible. And then we have been working very hard and continue to work very hard to advance data protection and standardization needs. And there's all sorts of ways that we consider in data protection. And standardization goes everywhere from the types of data that we collect, both when you think about numerical and units, but also how are we going to standardize qualitative types of data or narratives. From a progress standpoint, we've also formed a data governance team. That team is, again, participants, and they make the decisions regarding how data is displayed within the platform. And they ultimately will also play a role in how the data might be released or what reports might be generated off of the platform. And we also have a stakeholder committee that is made up of public health, interested parties from public health agencies, including both states of California and Arizona, as well as from FDA and the CDC. And then finally, we've engaged with other stakeholders and interested parties just so that they're aware of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And we're always open to take advice or thoughts that people might have. And then we continue to build our grower level company dashboards. So what are we doing now? We're continuing, like I said, and we will always be working on getting our data standardized and promoting the project. But we're also now looking at specific commodity-based projects and starting to, as Cronan mentioned, begin data analyses. And then also with doing that, we are working on a specific project with the leafy green industry, and then hopefully advancing ways of shared value for the data trust with other public health regulators, such as the FDA. I'm just here to remind you that there are actually 2 types of dashboards right now within Greenlink. There's the individual company dashboard, which he went over, which would allow an operation to visualize their data. They can look at it both in terms of time, location, commodity. They have a number of choices here, and I have a demo video that'll go into that in more detail. We also have an aggregated dashboard, and this is where the data that is selected for aggregation, so an operation can decide what data they would like to include in the aggregated data set, is elevated, and then this dashboard is available to them to as Cronan mentioned, either benchmark, take a look at how they're doing, look at trends overall in the industry, and then we'll continue to build out analytics from this data set as it develops. So I think we're ready to go to a demonstration of the Greenlink platform, just so you all can get an idea of how it works and what are some of the features that are included.
Hi, this video will serve as a quick overview of Greenlink, the Western Growers Food Safety Data Sharing Platform, powered by Creme Global. Let's begin our tour. To access the platform, users begin by navigating to wg.cremedatafoundry.com. Here, users will enter their unique login credentials. After logging in, you'll arrive at the Data Submission portal. This page is where data can be manually uploaded. To access the dashboard, you'll navigate to the top where Dashboards button is located. Click here and select My Company Data. You'll now arrive at the individual company dashboard. The purpose of this dashboard is to provide insights into your own operation and compare against the aggregated data set within the platform. Before we begin explaining dashboard, please note the data displayed on this page is for demonstration purposes only and is not real data. Here's the main page. At the top are the main tabs representing categories of data, grouped relative to the growing process: pre-season, pre-harvest, and post-harvest data. The majority of the platform development has been around the pre-harvest section of the dashboard, so this video will focus on that section. Current development efforts are now focused on the pre-season and post-harvest tabs. On the left is the navigation pane, where you will find filters including a date range selector or year selector, ranch region, grower/ranch drill downs, and commodity filtering options. These filters will be reactive and only show the data pertaining to the filters you select. These filters will also be reflected throughout the dashboard, including along the top where the KPIs are located. These key performance indicators compare your data to others in the platform. Below our analysis tabs, let's look through all the information in these tabs. Map view. This provides an interactive geolocation representation of ranch locations. When GPS coordinates are provided, you can hover over any of these dots and you'll be able to see more information. It's important to note that in the map and data throughout the dashboard, it only reflects the data from an individual's participant's organization. No one will be able to see the data other than their own. Tissue test and water test tabs. These provide summary statistics such as total number of tests and out-of-tolerance numbers by individual target organisms and visualizations to aid in their interpretation. A future release of the tool will contain other water data as well. Tissue sampling SOP. This tab compares the data from your harvest records to those outlined in your sampling SOP to help you understand how closely you follow your SOPs, including your sampling window, number of samples per acre, and the number of days between sampling and harvest. Inspection observations. This provides statistics on the number of inspections you perform per grower/ranch and a breakdown depending on the categorization of those issues, whether they be bird, buffer, etc. Inspection timeline. This provides a fresh alternative way to look at an inspection observation by showing a timeline of the observation issues that occurred and the corrective action taken at that point in time. Weather and inspections. This shows issues that were reported and overlays them with environmental factors. Shown here are temperature, wind speed, and precipitation numbers. These visualizations are particularly helpful in understanding the correlation or relationship between these types of events and weather behavior. Other environmental factors are still being pursued and will be added to this tab. Cost calculator. This tab was added to the platform by request from the participants during the pilot phase of the project. Users can input numbers at the top and adjust varying costs such as cost per sample, the estimated cost for their sampling practices, and other variables. Those numbers are broken down and summarized by tissue and water costs separately, and also broken down by grower. This concludes our brief tour of Greenlink, brought to you by Western Growers Science. For more information to join, or for a more in-depth look at the tool, please email us at data@wga.com. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll just conclude by saying that we are really excited about this tool and what it can do for our members, but it is still in development, and we welcome any feedback or any extended interest that might be out there. So with that, I'll give it back to Emily.
Thank you so much, Dan. I think that was an exciting overview, and I really appreciated being able to see that video and see examples of what the platform can do. So before inviting Tony up, I do want to remind listeners that we have the Q&A coming up after Tony's presentation with the full panel. So please, if you have questions, go ahead and add them into the Q&A box. But as I said, last but certainly not least, we have Tony here to provide a grower perspective on using this platform.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to the Contact Series for inviting me to speak, and look forward to sharing some of our experiences with data sharing. So Bonduelle Fresh Americas is part of Bonduelle, which is a 150-year-old company out of France and serves globally not only fresh cut produce, but canned and frozen items, vegetables around the world. And we continue our longevity by investing in different technologies and what have you. And so one of the areas that we've been challenging ourselves in is how to use our data to improve our processes. And so this is one area that we embraced a couple of years ago, and it's been showing some benefits. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about it today. So briefly, I just wanted to talk about what the industry had been talking amongst themselves about the potential benefits of data sharing and how we were going to use collective data. Then I'll talk a little bit about our interest, specifically Bonduelle Fresh Americas' interest in using a data sharing platform. And then specifically some of the things that Greenlink specifically has aided us in, and what we see in the future potential of data sharing. As I mentioned earlier, the leafy green arena had been obviously having some problems with reoccurring outbreaks that we're all aware of. And as the industry groups had worked on coming together to talk about common experiences, we all recognized that we had quite a bit of data amongst our individual companies. And one of the things that was recurring a theme was that we have these thousands and thousands of data points amongst ourselves. And on top of that, the positivity rate of pre-harvest pathogen testing and or field samples that were being taken from not only ourselves, but regulatory folks, was that the positivity rate was very low. And so could we collectively take our data and learn from new trends, or as you combine data, was there things that we could learn beyond just our own data sets? And so we talked about that ourselves, but the common theme that kept coming back was, how are we going to do that? Who and where and how are we going to store this data? Who would have access to the data if we did these types of things? And so while we were looking at some of these things, the questions of the complexity around it really kept getting in the way. And when we heard about a new data sharing platform that was having some success, I think that started to pique our interest. This, as I mentioned, the successful platform that Creme Global had and was working started to then work with different regulatory agencies. And while FDA was currently in the leafy green segment out and taking some of their own surveys and causing some disruption to the industry. And I'm not saying that the FDA shouldn't have been taking samples. They should, they have the right, and obviously they need to do what they need to do. But if we could embrace the smarter era of food safety and work collaboratively and take the data points that we have individually and work with this collective manner, there could be some big benefits. And we wanted to look at different ways of pulling this together. And when questions came up about how are we going to share data, and we got a little bit more tentative about it because of data protection and some of those questions that I was asking ourselves earlier, we then thought, okay, is Bonduelle big enough to form its own individual relationship with the FDA and start to impact the way the FDA was if we shared our own data? And then it would circle back around and we would get in this vicious circle with ourselves. maybe our data is not big enough to influence the regulatory arena themselves. And who do we think we are by trying to think that way even? It kept coming back to, we need a collective form in order to do that. So Western Growers then proposed to some of its members, hey, we have this data sharing platform. And for sure, again, we were right in this midst being tested by the regulatory agency. So it was a very hot topic and the timing was right. And so when we heard about it, we definitely wanted to listen in, although some of those items that I brought up earlier of how this was going to work, how are we going to secure our data, all these things kept getting in the way, but we wanted to listen because this had some potential benefits. And again, as I mentioned earlier, our IT department's concerns of protection of data prevented us in some of the other platforms that were out there, but this one started to check off all the boxes of data protection and what have you. And so this really started to work for us. And so we wanted to now jump into the beta testing program with this. So this is when we got into the beta phase testing, and as it changed from data sharing platform into now full-blown Greenlink, we'll talk about some of the experiences that Bonduelle Fresh America had with Greenlink. As I mentioned earlier, yes, our initial interest was a way to, how could we work with potentially easing regulatory sampling? And again, that might have been naive. That was one of the goals. We had our data into the database already, and we were looking at different ways of what information do we need to include beyond just pre-harvest data testing and some of these other data points that Cronan had spoke about. But right around that time, we had this small rash of positive findings within a very short period of time. And normally for us, a couple of things would start to occur from that. Obviously, a red flag would go up because, as I mentioned earlier, we don't have that many positive findings at our pre-harvest level. So when you have a couple in a short period of time, you start to wonder, is there something going on, something bigger going on? And so we were able to use the platform to look beyond the data management tools that we already had. So we thought we were pretty good with the tools that we already had with storage of our data, organization of our data. We had charts, flow charts, trend charts, all these types of things to help us. But in this particular case, we dove into Greenlink, and within a very short period of time, we were able to communicate back to our internal stakeholders that even though we had 3 positives in this short window, that there were no commonalities, that there were some unique aspects that we weren't able to unearth as easy as we were in the past. So in this short period, less than an hour, we were able to see no commonalities between these positives, that they were in different regions, there were different pathogen types. There was no things that we couldn't see before, like weather patterns. While we could dig them up from our growers and from our own tools, but real quick, we could see that the wind directions didn't have a role, that there was no excessive precipitation, and all these things that Cronan had been speaking about were actually coming true for us because we had access to this data and we had access to it really quickly. And then we could also see that the ranches that were involved hadn't been involved in prior years, going back as many as 4 years. Our data ourselves that we had implemented had gone back 4+ years. And so we really started to see, hey, this is a powerful tool. We can answer a lot of questions relatively quickly and ease because the platform organizes this data well. We can drill down quickly and we can answer a bunch of questions to help us understand if we have a bigger problem or not. And then because we could say and report internally very quickly, that allowed us to use our resources instead of digging through some of our older tools. We were then able to deploy those resources to go out and to get into root cause analysis and to really find out what was going on versus, again, digging through some of our older tools that we had in place. And again, I mentioned this earlier, we thought our tools were pretty good, but we found out that the Greenlink platform was actually much superior in many facets in helping us understand what was going on with those, with that small rash of positive pre-harvest tests that had come back. Yeah, so I touched on this earlier, but again, as we had that one example, and then as we started to say, hey, this is a pretty cool tool, one of the things we started to see too is that we could look at our grower performance against various requirements, a lot of our preseason risk assessments. We could start to categorize if a grower range and or area had more activity as it related to, let's say, bird activity or distance from other risks such as hobby farms and those. So you could start drilling down quickly and starting to see if a grower type and or if an area had a certain trend that we couldn't see before. We also had weather data, but this new tool was able to allow us to pull up trends of data, and we could look at it a year, we could look at it over a week, we could, or a month, whatever we wanted to look at. And then even as Cronan mentioned, we could even track the cost of food safety much quicker than we could before. So there was a lot of benefits that we were really starting to see come true with this new platform, and really starting to show us, hey, by participating in this, look at some of these benefits that we have beyond the potential of getting beyond some of that regulatory testing. Bond BFA is, we are definitely embracing this data sharing, because not only do we have some of these opportunities to learn from our own data, we have opportunities to compare our data against aggregated data. And hopefully we'll get to a point where as more and more data flows into the system, we'll have some learnings from machine learning, as Cronan had talked about, and where the system can see things that maybe that we haven't been able to see with our trend analysis. And from those learnings that we can then go into continuous improvement modes and put additional mitigation steps in place to reduce potential future outbreaks from occurring. And if we could do that by having this new tool available to us, we see that as a win, not only for ourselves, but for consumers, the leafy green industry, and even for regulatory. Again, a lot of these things that I mentioned and that we've heard from the prior group definitely are manifesting themselves. It is a good tool. It's exceeding our expectations by far. And we had an initial interest was in one area, and other benefits really started to manifest themselves and show themselves in other areas. And so we're a happy user. We encourage others to consider the platform, take a look, and I'm quite confident that they could help them in ways that maybe would be beyond some of their concerns that they would have from data sharing. So with that, I hand it back over to
I want to thank Emily for guest moderating. I really appreciated it. It was fun to just listen. I want to thank Deanne, Cronan, Tony, Sonia. That was fantastic. I think we can all agree the future is now, and all the science would tell you that this is where we are headed in terms of predictive analytics and just being able to forecast. I want to remind everyone about To the Buyer and Beyond. If you're a Toy Story Buzz Lightyear fan, what's the new traceability rule and what this means to the produce industry? We'll be coming back Thursday, February 23rd, 2023. So a little bit longer of a break before you see us again, but we are very excited for this webinar. So with that, thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your evening or your afternoon or wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much.